Yeah, this book was incredibly influential for me. I think in part this book was the reason why I left Newfoundland when I did, because it gave me the tools to understand why I was holding myself back mentally. Let's go, we're back at it again. Foreign Gems, episode something. We've lost track now. But we're back at it again on a beautiful Wednesday here in Burnaby, recording our next episode of the pod. And today, what are we going to talk about, Ola?
We are talking about books today.
We're going to talk about books. Before we get into all of that, how are you doing? Are you enjoying this beautiful summer weather we've been experiencing lately?
I am actually. It's a pretty good day. I only noticed how good it was when the AC kicked in, because it's automatic.
Yeah.
So I was wondering why.
Oh, big flexer.
I was wondering why it kicked in, and I realized that, it looks nice outside. So.
Okay, so now you know Ola is living like a king, like his name these days.
About that.
I don't have AC in my house, but I'm not looking forward to suffering this summer.
Dude, you gotta buy one now because
because we're gonna go
couple
crazy.
Of months,
I should buy a couple and hold on to one. You know?
I've been thinking about that arbitrage. We talked about that the last release episode. Arbitrage.
More side hustle ideas for y'all in the bonus.
But I feel like, I also want good energy, and I know how much people in Vancouver, they suffer during that time.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to curse me.
You don't want the karma?
Yeah, I don't want bad karma, so.
Okay, all right.
Maybe I shouldn't hold one.
Yeah, we don't hold on to that.
No.
But for some of you ruthless business people out there, that's something you could think about. Grab all the fans before the summer comes, and that's some arbitrage planning for you. But anyways, I digress. We'll get back to the topic at hand. So we were brainstorming today as to what topics we should talk about, and we both realized that some of the more influential pieces of media, I guess, that we consume is books. And some of them have been incredibly influential in my life and in my way of thinking. And I want to share a few of those today. And we haven't shared our list of what books we're going to talk about. We just know that there's a list of a couple books. And so we'll go back and forth and talk about some of Ola's favorite books, some of my favorite books, and key takeaways from them, as well as kind of discuss some of the points of books that, the other hasn't heard about and vice versa. Sound good to you?
That sounds great to me.
Excellent, man. So do you want to start or should I start? Okay, so we had to pause the pod for a little bit because the train went by, but we're back again. We were just about to dive into the first book that we each have brought to the table. Ola, go ahead. What's the first book on your mind?
Yeah, so for first book, did you want just the most impactful, or did you want the first book that made an impression?
I did it in chronological order.
Chronological?
Yeah, so the first one that made you really think about, maybe the way that you were living or how you want to go about living, something of that direction. Or it could just be like a nice, like a fiction book or something like that you really enjoy.
Yeah, the first book would actually surprise you a lot.
Okay.
The first book that opened my eyes to more creative thinking is the Bible.
Okay, whoa, he's starting off hot, bro. He's starting off with the big books.
The Bible, there was this book called My Book of Bible Stories.
Okay.
And it has all these pictures.
Yeah.
And before that, I used to go to church. I used to be in the church. I just loved going to all kinds of church because my mom gave me money to donate. And I'll keep some. And I was in a school band. I was in a church band. I wasn't a good drummer, but I just kind of finessed my way into that. But the point was, it was all very, I was part of the entire religion. I was really into it until I read this book, and the book read much like a storybook, and it had all these pictures, and it was very fictional. So then it actually got me to start thinking of Bible. What if this is all fiction? And then I went down this rabbit hole of what if it's all fiction, and it made me who I am today, who I still think religion is good for what it is. Mm-hmm. I'm just not religious, and it was from that, when I was 9.
Interesting. So I didn't have the Bible on this list, I'm gonna be honest with you. But the Bible actually was quite influential back in the day. The reason being, me and my parents had this standing tradition of praying together every night. And as part of that tradition, we would read like an excerpt of the Bible. And we started all the way at Genesis, and we were making our way through. And you're not reading entire chapters of the Bible at a time. So we were reading maybe like one page, something like that at a time, and stopping at a logical kind of pause in the story. And I remember that being very like a really uniting moment in the family usually. It's a nice way to connect with everyone throughout the day, get everybody's thoughts on the passage that we just read, and then consider that as part of the prayer. And yeah, so it's one of the family traditions that I definitely miss when I moved away from home.
Oh, wow.
Even though like, after kind of all my exposure to all of the spiritual ideas, I now kind of consider everything in a more broad lens rather than like a specific religious brushstroke. I agree with you. I think there's value in religion in certain ways, but I also think it can be weaponized in some ways.
Yeah.
But one thing I do really appreciate about it is its ability to bring a community together. And anywhere you go, you can have community as long as like you're a member of a type of religion. So that we experienced a similar thing, but in our small family unit rather than like a big community thing. We did church as well and all of that for a while. But I remember even when we didn't go to church as much, that was something that really resonated with me as like family time, you know.
Yeah.
Always brings back fond memories.
Yeah, church. I do envy my friends who go to church here because it's just more, you have that community inbuilt. It's very social. They all support one another. But yeah, there's just, I have my other reasons that, coming from Nigeria, there's just, you see different sides of religion that is not necessarily always pleasant.
Say less. That's really the reason why we didn't go as much. We started to see a bit of hypocrisy.
But it is what it is. I have nothing against it, and I think everyone should do whatever makes them, feel good.
100%. I agree with that, and it can be an incredible tool for discipline as well.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So what about yours? What's your first one?
The first book that I had here is Thinking Fast and Slow. Have you heard of that one?
I have. I have it. I haven't read it.
You should read that book.
I've had it for like 4 years in my Kindle.
I think you should read that book. I think you'd actually really enjoy it.
Okay.
It's by Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah.
I honestly haven't read anything else by him, but he's like a behavioral psychologist.
He has another one, I think, Drive or something like that.
Okay, I'll look into that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's probably around a similar idea. But the core concept in the book is explaining that, as in the title, that humans have two ways of thinking, like a fast way of thinking, a more reactionary way of thinking, and a slow way of thinking, which includes more, digesting information and processing the information, and then making a move based on that. But what he proposes in the book is that we don't have a lot of control over which system is currently active. And so I was actually reading it from a marketing standpoint to understand why people do certain things and to maybe deploy that in some of the campaigns that we have or on the website that we were building at the time. But system one is like fast and automatic, and there's ways that you can approach someone's system one way of thinking and ensure that it's in favor with whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. And then there's like a system two, which is slow and deliberate, and it's good to understand where one system might switch over to another and actually start to plan things around that as well. And the reason I think it would be really useful is because of some of the work that you do in product and in UX. When somebody's using your product, there's some things that are going to happen like in a flash of an instant, like they see a particular thing or they see a particular button or they see a particular area of what you're designing. Yeah. And it needs to be easily digestible, that this is where they need to go next. And the reason you want that is to avoid cognitive dissonance. Right. Because if you're putting the friction essentially in the way of someone's method of thinking, it can make the experience seem slow or slower than it needs to be, and it's tiring for them to actually work through something like that. And then when system two comes into play, it could be maybe the broader goal that they're trying to accomplish and making sure that you are speaking to those to those objectives as well, so that you're designing into your product a user flow that speaks both to the quick reactionary way of thinking, but also the long-term, more strategic way of thinking that they might be employing.
It's actually related to a key concept in UX that I've been thinking about a lot this week.
Yeah.
Locus of attention.
Yeah.
So it's people can only pay attention to one thing at a time, one main thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're designing a user interface, always think like what's the main thing. And there are a lot of different ways to like test for that. When you mention like the cognitive load and things.
Yeah.
You call it a squint test. So if you design a interface, just like however you can make your eyes blurry. Yep. You can use Figma as well to design something to look blurry, and try to see where the attention, what is still grabbing your attention on the screen. So like the call to actions, the main areas of the interface. So yeah,
are very clear, and you don't actually need to process much
in
order to
your subconscious
know where to go.
Yeah, it catches them.
Yeah, for sure. To summarize in like one long line, or not one long line, but like one key point, is the whole book teaches you about like these different systems and how they can be biased, and how they, you can make mistakes when you're relying on either one of those systems. But the core idea is that like we can actually improve our decision making as long as we're aware of those biases.
Yeah.
So that's like the broader application. Right now we were talking about like product, or in a user experience on a website or something.
Yeah.
But something that you can take away for your own life is to be aware that, oh, I might just be reacting to this situation, and this might be my system one speaking. Maybe you're in a situation where you're forced to act rashly. Instead of doing that and going with your immediate reaction, it can make sense to take a beat and let the other system take over and actually analyze and collect all of the information about a particular situation or a decision that you have to make before you make that decision. So that was the thing that I took away most from this book. Is like, okay, sometimes your initial reaction can feel like a gut reaction, and we're like, this is my instinct, I need to go in this direct response, but it might not be your true response if you gave system 2 a chance to also take a look at the problem.
I think that's actually why I haven't read it, because the concept, even though it looked valuable, it feels like things I had learned in other sources already.
Yep.
Because the concept of system 1 and system 2, I see it as rational mind and ego. And the ego is the one that wants to react. It's the reason we're ambitious. It's the reason we get angry. It's the reason we get sad, we get happy. Yeah. And the rational one is just has no emotion. It's just the pure data, pure logic, but you need both.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you'll find, especially in a lot of nonfiction books, that they put into like succinct words things that you maybe intuitively have already experienced. Like you mentioned, you already kind of are aware that there's like an ego-driven reaction, which can be more short-term, and the more rational one could be a bit more long-term. But it can be really helpful to see or hear examples or read examples of when it was more beneficial in order to take that beat, or when it was more beneficial to go with the gut instinct, because it's there for a reason. Yeah. Like you don't have the system 1 to sabotage you. You call it the ego. Ego isn't necessarily bad for you. Like it's there for you.
It's a tool.
It's for survival purposes. The reason you might react a particular way is it's an extension of fight or flight. Like you're trying to make the best decision for your body instantly. Yeah. But sometimes those dangers aren't instant, and so it might make more sense for you to take a beat and actually think about, like, bring the rational brain into it and say, okay, what are all of these options for real? Then which one am I gonna go with? I recommend you read it anyways, even though I think you understand like some of the core concepts. I think it could be helpful to go through some of those examples and see.
Related book that I've actually read that didn't make it to my list, but you just reminded me, is Ego is the Enemy. That's another.
I haven't read that.
That book actually had a lot of impact on me, but not immediately. When I first read it, I read it. They said the right book can be wrong for you if you read it at the wrong time. That was one of the books that first time I read it, I didn't understand the concept very much. And then eventually when I read it again, it was much clearer, the concept.
Gotcha.
But
Ego is the enemy.
What?
Ego is the enemy, right?
Ego is the enemy. It goes, now that I understand the concept of ego more, I would not name the book "Ego is the Enemy." Like once you frame it as ego is the enemy, even your ego gets defensive, even with the concept.
Maybe that's what they were going for, a bit of a reaction from you. So
Yeah.
like, what do you mean by that? Let me go. Let's explore.
But yeah, no, he has a follow up, which is like The Obstacle is the Way, which it's Ryan Holiday, by the way. That's the author of the book. He's really.
I've definitely heard of both of these.
He's a really good writer, and he's very big on like Stoicism as well. And that book got me into the mindset of Stoicism and researching more about that philosophy.
You just made me think of another book actually when you talked about that. Do you know? If you looked into Stoicism stuff, have you heard of Marcus Aurelius?
Oh yeah, I was about to say that just then.
Yeah, that made me think of that immediately. That was I didn't actually read the book, like read it. I listened to the audiobook. I also highly recommend that one, but yeah, not on the list.
There's also another old book in terms of like Stoicism, Letters from Seneca.
Okay.
That's
I feel like that was referenced maybe.
Yeah, that's a really good book. It wasn't written by Seneca. I think it was written by one of his like followers or something.
Apprentices or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
It teaches you a lot of stuff.
Interesting.
It didn't make it on my list as well. That was one
that wasn't on
book.
there. I should have thrown that on there actually, because there's some good lessons. Like I think the idea of Stoicism in general has some good lessons for, especially young people, to kind of understand and process the world around them a little bit better than you might if you didn't have some of these guiding principles.
Yeah. I think that was what helped me survive like really tough times in when I was in Newfoundland, just being stoic towards what was going on around me. I wasn't always too excited when things were good. I wasn't too down when things were down. I was just at this nice happy ground, which was amazing.
Just content always.
But you also don't want to go extreme into like being stoic towards everything. You need a bit of hedonism as well. You need to. I mentioned that before to you. I removed all fun in my life.
When you went monk mode?
Yeah, I was in monk mode. It was not fun. I didn't feel creative. I didn't feel happy. I don't recommend that to anyone.
You need some color.
Yeah, you need some color in your life.
Yeah. All right, your turn.
A good follow-up to that, I think, still not my most impactful book, however, related to Stoicism and everything, is Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes.
By Viktor Frankl.
Yeah,
that was a book, because you hear me talk a lot about value, principles, but the whole idea is finding meaning in what you do. That book was what got me to, before I start anything, I always start from the why, I always start from the meaning, the story, and it doesn't always have to be something too serious, but I need to have that for myself that is written down. Like I could, even if I'm just going out with friends, it has to be like, why am I doing this? Oh, because my friend needs me to do this, or there has to be a meaning to it.
It reminds me so much of one, and it's not on the list, but it reminds me of one of the habits of highly effective people. The book is Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. One of
Stephen Covey, what's his name?
Yeah, Cohen maybe. I don't know. Yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head, but principle one, I'm pretty sure, is start with the end in mind, which is exactly what you're talking about. Like have a purpose for the things that you do, and have a clear vision as to like why you're trying to get there. Yeah. And I think that also probably inspired Start with Why by Simon Sinek. So like I think they're all similar concepts in that you need to know where you're going in order to get there at the fastest route. Also to know when you got there. Yeah, that's what you find with a lot of books. You can call it repackaging, but it's also like different angles of looking at things. That's right. What resonates with someone might not resonate. Someone might not understand the concept of starting with why. Someone else might not like the concept of end in mind. Yeah. There's different ways, different flavors of passing on the same message. That's a really good point. And in a way, we're kind of doing the same thing with this pod, in that like we package it based on our experience, even though some of these things you might be able to find somewhere else. Right. But told by different people with different experiences, it might resonate in a different way. That's why I think there's always a room for somebody to express themselves. Even when we started this podcast, there's tons of podcasts out there,
Oh yeah.
but none of them are going to be our podcast.
Yeah.
So there's always room for you to share your voice and share your experience and share your thoughts, just because you're going to tell them from a particular new angle or your angle, which could resonate more with a particular person than maybe somebody else saying the same concept.
I agree, and things get outdated as well. Like, have you ever read a book that people tell you that this is a classic, this is the best book of all time, and you read it and it's like complete garbage
What
to
is
you?
this?
But it's not garbage, it's just not with your time.
It doesn't hit the same, right?
Yeah, so that's you can just rewrite the same book for today's concept. You can rewrite the same book using the example in a particular area. This is another idea from the side hustle ideas we dropped.
Yeah.
You can localize an idea of a book into your culture, into the things that people would understand.
It's like a part 3 now. You know, we're going
Yeah, like take the same idea. Of course, credit the source. You know, don't just steal. But
you gotta cite your sources.
yeah, but you know, inspired by, you know, this was inspired by, and then take it into whatever direction you want to take it. That's what people do with music as well.
Yeah.
Like, you find a concept in music, you find like thousands of different variations of the same topic. But yeah, anyways.
What would you say, like, in Man's Search for Meaning, what was the big takeaway that you had from it that, you know, made you put this book on the list?
Yeah, you can always find meaning in everything, even the deepest suffering. Like, even the author is an Holocaust survivor, and he was just talking. He was mentioning how, like, he was able to find meaning while being in like concentration camp. In the darkest of times, you find meaning, like, oh, this is preparing me for this. Then this is, I don't know. You can be the hero of whatever story you want to come up with.
Do you think that meaning is necessary in order for somebody to have like the will to survive or to thrive?
There are many ways. It's not always meaning. I know I said purpose is another example. Yeah, I think that's what I would say. Meaning is just another form of purpose.
Yeah.
If that even makes sense.
Yeah. Because I mean, I think the two concepts are related quite closely.
Something can be meaningless, but like, I don't know, I would go through the deepest suffering to do anything for my mom, and it doesn't have to be meaningful to me.
Right.
It's serving the purpose, but in a way, that's the meaning.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Where are we at?
So
Okay, we gotta move on.
Yeah.
We gotta move on to the next one. Okay, so the next book that I had on there is The Courage to be Disliked. Have you heard of that one?
I also have that on my Kindle. I have like 200 books on my Kindle that I haven't read.
Oh my God.
There's just so much stuff to go through. But yeah.
I'm pretty sure this book is one of my favorite nonfiction books. It's well, I mean, it's obviously in the top 5 list.
I will read this one though. Yeah.
That one is what I said. One of my favorite. What I really meant to say. I think this might be my favorite nonfiction
Oh wow.
book.
Okay. I definitely have to read that then.
Yeah, this book was incredibly influential for me. I think in part this book was the reason why I left Newfoundland when I did, because it gave me the tools to understand why I was holding myself back mentally. I don't know how to even explain like the impact this thing had in the way that I think and in the way that I make my decisions. I think back in the day I used to consider, and I think you should be considerate of other people, of course, but not at the expense of your own growth. And I was doing that a lot. I was gearing towards keeping the status quo and not ruffling any feathers as much as possible, like almost being conflict avoidant, even though I knew deep down that I wanted to make a big change or make a big shift. I didn't have the tools, or like I didn't feel like, I thought it was selfish to do that. And this book opened up my eyes as to why actually suppressing your true self or your true ambitions can be a more selfish move, in that you're kind of restricting the gift that you might have to offer the world by living small. And that actually, it made me want to go after what I want to go after. And I don't mean to say that if anybody decides to stay where they are, that they're living small or anything like that, but that was the case for me. I was like caging myself, even though I didn't really need to. And so, this book, there's a bunch of concepts in here that just made me think about situations completely differently and approach problems in my life completely differently as well. I highly recommend.
I am definitely reading that. I've been thinking about that concept this week as well. Just the whole concept of not really focusing on outside perspective. When you have a song in your heart that needs to be sang, you need to sing it. And I don't know why it's just been on my mind. So it was one of the books that I had at the back of my mind that I need to read. So yeah, I just need to turn on the Kindle.
Yeah, man, you charge that Kindle up and get to it. Actually, it's beach weather soon,
Yeah.
So a good reason for you to go sit outside and read a book.
Yeah, I might do that actually.
Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder.
Hey, of course, man. All right, let's move on to yours.
The one that actually would be a close tie-in to that and is my most impactful book of my entire life so far, The Alchemist.
Let's go.
The Alchemist. When I was at Tim Hortons, one of my friends just brought the book to work, and he said the book has changed them, and I thought it was like, I was like, what is this guy saying? This was when we're still, I was DJing, we were all still we didn't know what we wanted to do, we were all figuring out life. Yeah, and I noticed a little bit of a change in him, like it became a lot more serious, but not in like boring way. Like he just knew what he wanted to do. It seemed like he was more sure of himself. So then I decided to read the same book, and sure enough, like I just noticed after like 2 hours of reading this book, I started noticing a shift in my brain, all the little quotes here and there, or the reminder. Earlier on when you mentioned, when you're not using your gift, it's actually selfish because you are denying the world of what makes you special. That was one of the concepts that resonated with me in the book. Even the suffering, we talk about it, like no one ever suffers in the pursuit of their dreams.
Yep.
When you put something into the universe will conspire to make it happen.
Yep.
Like that book just opened all of this avenues of thinking in my brain that didn't exist before. And 2-3 more of my friends read the same book the same summer, and I kid you not, like 3-4 months later, all of our lives were all like completely different. Our trajectory changed. That's when I quit I was doing like 4 or 5 different side hustles. That's when I quit everything and I started a company, and it didn't work out, but it led me down the path that I'm on. And all my other friends that did the same thing, their stories have been the same as well. So yeah, that book was definitely life-changing, 100%.
Great shout out. I actually had the same one as for next.
Yeah.
I fully agree with everything that you said. I really enjoy the follow your dreams method, or follow your dream message, I meant to say. I also really resonate with the universe conspires to help you as a concept, as long as you're putting it out there and you're going for it. I also think one of the things that the book, and the great thing about this book is 2 things. One, it's short.
Oh yeah.
It's very easily consumable and you can do it multiple times for different stages in your life. But then 2, also, it's a non-fiction fiction book, because it tells a story. And so you're following the story of this main character, Santiago. But at the same time, you are being taught lessons that are like very non-fiction in a way, like they're very applicable and like self-prescribed gospel in a way, like
it's like vegetables wrapped in candy.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the core messages that I really took away from the book is to embrace the journey, because the journey ends up being the gold in the end, which I thought was like extremely clever, not like just in the way this in storytelling, but also just extremely applicable, because I think as people, we generally like to see the end. You know how we were talking about earlier, like start with the end in mind?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can just keep the idea of the end the whole time and not allow yourself to be happy until you get to that end, which I think is a quick way to be miserable your whole life.
Yeah.
But this book really emphasizes just being present, being in the moment, and enjoying the journey as it comes along, because the journey is the end game. Like the fact that you're, making your way through life, finding your way to the purpose, maybe you discover your purpose and you're finding a way to amplify that as much as possible, affect as many people as possible, help as many people as possible. It's important to enjoy day one of the journey as much as you enjoy, like, I don't know, day 99 if there's 100.
Yeah.
As like just a general rule for enjoying life and being content.
Back to what you said about, focusing too much on the end goal might take away from the journey. Something that I was able to use to, reconcile that in my brain is to see myself as a storyteller. That's what I call myself, a storyteller.
Yeah.
So when I'm about to like start something new, I don't think, oh, what's the end going to be like? It's like, what's the story I'm going to tell? So I do want this to be obviously a success story, but that's the end in my head. But how I'm going to get there, I don't know. It's like I am writing it while I'm also reading it, and it makes it exciting. So even when the bad things happen, like last year was quite rough for me, but the days that I was up here, were the days where I reminded myself that, oh, this will be such a great story someday. Imagine like I can put this into a book. I could like, it just gives you this feel good feeling.
Yeah, put you in the hero's shoes in a way, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're they call it like player one, your player one mentality. Instead of you being a victim, you're like, no, like I am acting this. And yeah, if you see it as a movie that you're getting to see from like front row, it makes everything, even the worst stuff. Like I lost my luggage, or my luggage didn't arrive when I was in London. I didn't feel sad. I was like, imagine the stories I can tell of this, and which I'm telling right now.
This has happened.
Yeah. So like, it makes you almost very psychopathic, like because you're like the worst situations. You just find something to like about it.
Yeah, you should do it, even to the point of delusion. Who cares? Just go for it and make the story for yourself as much as possible.
Exactly. That's what makes life interesting. That's what gives life meaning.
I agree. Hey, little full circle.
Yeah. All right. So you're
honestly,
next.
One of the things, I just want a quick note on the storytelling thing. I think one of the things I admire a lot about you is the ability to tell stories, because you almost always have like an anecdote or like a quick like 5-sentence, even like 10-sentence story about like a particular concept you're trying to explain. And I don't just mean on the pod, like even outside, like when we're hanging out with some other people sometimes, I notice that you do default to like storytelling, and it makes the concept a lot more digestible when you can do it that way. So like storytelling in general as a concept is something I'm trying to get better at, but I just wanted to quickly shout that out while it was still fresh in my mind.
Oh, thanks. It's something I still keep trying to improve, so it's good to know that it's already at a place that is noticeably good.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think it's one of the things that makes you a good public speaker as well. So since you mentioned The Alchemist, that was going to be my next one. I'll skip to the next book that I was going to mention. The Gap and the Gain. Have you heard about that one?
No, I haven't actually at all.
I have that one, so you can borrow it whenever you want.
I still have to borrow you the creative acts as well.
Yes,
which it won't be part of today's because it's still fresh.
Yeah, I really want to read that one. The Gap and the Gain came to me actually at a time when I was feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome. So for anybody out there who's going through a similar stage in their life, it happens, I think, probably to everybody at some point. You find yourself in a room, you don't feel like you belong. But this book really made me understand that I do belong there, and it reinstilled a sense of confidence at a time when I really needed it. This is a book that I recommend even if you're not going through some sort of crisis. I think it's just a helpful book to help you remind you to practice gratitude in a way. And the core concept of the book is essentially what the title is, The Gap and the Gain. There's two things you can focus on. You can focus on the gap, which is kind of between where you are now and where you wish to be, which can sometimes feel daunting. A nice analogy is climbing a mountain, looking up and seeing how much more you have to go. And the gain is the opposite. It's like looking down the hill and seeing how much you've come up. And so when you focus on the gap, that's where issues in confidence can arise. That's where you can feel imposter syndrome and say, okay, I don't have everything it takes in order to do what it is that I want to do. But if you focus on what you've gained already, you can see how many times you've been able to go from milestone to milestone and make that jump, and remind yourself that you're always capable of doing that next thing. So it's like it's a positive reinforcement essentially for now I'm in a situation, I was in a situation previously. This is the same situation, just different context. I overcame the last one. Therefore, I'm going to be able to overcome this one, and it gives you that confidence to go after it.
That's so cool because I haven't read this book. I definitely am going to read it, 100%. But it made me laugh because before we started this podcast today, that was what I was telling you earlier. I was having a conversation with someone earlier, and I was like, "You don't know where I'm from.
Exactly right.
You can't tell me where I'm going when you don't know where I'm from."
That confidence, you know.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, man.
I need to read that book now.
I really enjoy it. It's got like a couple. These books have a ton of anecdotes in it, but like, and I encourage this when you're reading some of these types of books, is like, read one anecdote. If they're gonna say like 3 different anecdotes, maybe you don't need to hear the concept told to you in 3 different ways. Just read one so that you have a story to remind you of the concept, but then you can always move on to the next thing. This book was pretty notorious for that, because like I said, the concept can be summarized literally in the title. Yeah. If you just take that message away, there's the gap, there's the gain, I should focus on the gain. That's the entire concept of the book, but there's anecdotes in there to help you kind of remember certain concepts.
Pro tip as well for anyone that doesn't want to read books or too lazy to read books, you can always listen to the podcast that the authors are on as well.
Yeah.
They give the main, like they give 80% of the book.
Always.
And the 20% should be for books you really, really want to read.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Did you want me to go next?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the one I want to talk about, I think that has shaped me to be who I am today, is The Long Walk to Freedom.
Let's go, Nelson Mandela. Shout out.
Yeah, that book mellowed me. Like it just, it gave me a purpose in a way, because I became less selfish in a way. Like before that, I was like, oh, I want to get my dreams, I want to do this. That book made me learn about the value of sacrifice and like living for people outside of yourself. Like he sacrificed 28 years of his life for South Africa's freedom. Mm-hmm. Like, and every time I am given like 1 hour of sacrifice, I'm like, I'm not doing enough yet. That's when I became more family oriented. Yes. That's when I became more country oriented. And it's funny enough, that was actually when I decided I wasn't going to go back to Nigeria, even as wild as it sounds. But the reason was because I know like I'm better off helping the country outside of the country. It goes back to episode 2 when we talk about the African diaspora. Yep. And it was from that, like we all have our parts to play. I have friends who would never leave Nigeria. That's their part to play in helping the country reach where they need to go. For me, I need to do what I can do here with the opportunities I have and help the people back home. So I became more family-oriented, country-oriented, then more African thinking, which makes me a better human, and then whatever levels. And the whole idea of peaceful protest, you can be assertive without being aggressive. You can get things done without having to fight. The book helped me understand that sense of leadership. Definitely the best book for leadership for me. Yeah. As an African, I don't know if it would have the same effect on non-Africans, but as an African, 100%.
I feel like his story could resonate with anybody. I don't know, maybe the people he was going against at the time might find trouble with it. Yeah. But I recently looked into Nelson Mandela for something for Black History Month, and I was blown away. Some of the stuff I didn't know that are in Long Walk of Freedom, but I hadn't read the book, so I didn't really know like the details of that. But one of the craziest things that I learned was that like 20 plus years into his imprisonment, he was actually offered to be released as long as he stopped his mission. Yeah. And he said no. Imagine being in jail for 20 years and somebody's like, yeah, you can just go free now, just as long as you don't do this. But the conviction was so strong in the man to just be that clear-minded, even after being so long, like with your freedoms taken away, to remember the reason why he was there and what he was doing, and then to continue to do that with even more conviction past that, not knowing that you will ever come out. It's unhuman level of conviction. Yeah,
it definitely taught me the power of, being strong in your conviction and just having a strong spirit. You can have your freedom taken away, you can have everything taken away, but as long as your spirit is with you, your value, your principles, you're a free person.
You're free.
You are free mentally.
Yeah, love that. I love that. Nice, excellent addition to this group of books. My final one is The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. Have you heard of that guy?
I definitely have. Yeah, I
Okay.
have way too many of his quotes and musings clipped in my knowledge base.
Yeah, great guy for quotes.
Yeah.
legend tweeter. So there's always something worth a follow for sure. But this is like a collection of some of his tweet storms, a collection of excerpts from interviews that he had. I want to shout out another podcast, a little podcast called the Joe Rogan Experience. I don't know if anybody would have heard of that.
That's quite
But-
controversial.
So yeah, it's a tiny podcast. You guys can go check it out. Maybe give them a listen or two. They need it. But yeah, he had Naval Ravikant on there, and it's one of the better guests that he's had on for sure. And he talks about a lot of like these concepts that are in this book as well. But one of the key ones that stuck with me is happiness is a skill. And it's something that you can learn and continue to work on and improve, rather than like some elusive thing that you might get to if you seek some of the more material aspects of the world. So he talks about that a lot. He went from not having any money or opportunities to having a lot of money and opportunities, and he talks about like his state of mind between those two things, and how like one just enables you to be able to actually just have more time. That's like the core thing that he's winning with these opportunities and the money he's been able to make. Aside from that, there's some other concepts that he talks about that can be very useful as well, particularly if you're a coding enthusiast or you've been following these things with AI. He talks a lot about leveraging these new forms of capital in the world. One of the major ones being media. Like back in the day, maybe labor was such a big one, and like a big impressive company was like a company that had a lot of people working for it. But nowadays, even a more impressive thing is like having media that's working for you. You can think about certain personalities who you can't go to any platform and you don't hear their message. Maybe you're on TikTok and you're hearing something about them. You're on the podcast, you're hearing something about them. Those are other forms of capital as well and influence, and he talks about that too, which I think is useful from a practical sense. But the happiness thing is the one that has stuck with me the most, which is useful from like a day-to-day, just managing how content you are as a result, which is something that we've also covered a couple times in this pod.
Yeah, Naval. Yeah, there's so much wisdom from Naval over the years that I've got. One that I think though that I think has been useful for me in terms of like business and creativity was the one where he mentioned how putting like your name putting your name behind what you do is the biggest form of it's a leverage, but also it has that sense of accountability. And the richest people are the most accountable people.
100%.
The more you can be accountable for the success and failure of something, the more wealth you get. You know? And it also ties back to another book I didn't mention, because I don't think any of you want to read that book, but I think you should all read that book because it's so heavy, it's so dense. Skin in the Game.
Oh, I haven't even heard of that book.
Yeah, it's Skin in the Game. It's a very dense book, but it's very amazing. But anyways, the concept is having skin in the game, taking risk.
Yeah, great point about that. That is something that he likes to preach for sure. Is that accountability piece.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really practical one to apply even to your day-to-day work. Like if you're trying to get promoted or something like that, put your name behind projects that you're doing. Try to be the one who's doing the presentation of the results, come what may. If you're thinking about a project and you are, looking for support for it, go out there and make sure that it seems like it's yours. It's not just yours. Like it seems like it's yours. So you have that accountability tied to it, and come what may. Like sometimes you will have failures, and the failure is also multiplied because your name is all over this thing.
Oh yeah.
But when the success happens, that's multiplied a ton as well. And
it's a risk.
people trust people who put their name on things and who are willing to be accountable for the results of something.
Yeah, I also was watching the documentary of the original Mac team, Apple.
Yeah.
And the first few Macs, they all signed their name behind each and every one of the machine. And I thought that's a cool concept. And I was telling my manager actually at work yesterday that I want to be putting that level of craft into my work where it's almost, I can put my signature on it. Like it's something I can be proud of. And yeah, it's such a cool, having skin in the game. It's such a cool concept.
It really is.
But yeah, other Naval things people should check out is tweet. He has a tweet that is still pinned as of today. How to get rich without getting, how to get rich without getting lucky.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long tweet, but it tweets in like very short style. So it's very useful. I'm pretty sure it's probably one of the most liked tweets on Twitter.
Yeah, shout out.
Yeah, you have that. The book that Mark mentioned, the Naval Ravikant Almanac, it's free actually. On the PDF is free, but you can also buy it if you want to.
Yep.
And he has a podcast, which it goes through the tweets one by one.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I did not know that.
In the typical Naval fashion, it's like 5 minutes or less or something like that.
Oh, he's about to get a quick subscribe on that.
Yeah, it's very fun. You can go through the entire thing in like 2 hours. I'm pretty sure.
Deadly, man. I know what I'm doing on my drive back later now. All right, do you want to close this off?
Yeah, there's a bunch more. I would just go through them quickly, but I'm not going in details. But you will see them or hear them mentioned over the future episodes. One is Moonwalking with Einstein.
Yeah.
So sometimes when Mark would say something, I will repeat it. Not necessarily because I didn't hear it the first time, not because I didn't understand, but it's a way to register in my brain so I don't forget. So yeah, the concept of memory palace, storing things that people tell you in your memory palace so that you remember, chunking information together, and another one is exaggerating information. So when someone tells you my name is Michael Jonathan, in my head it's like Michael Jackson. Yeah. It's like Michael Jackson's reincarnation. That's a terrible example. But the point is, exaggerate it so much that it looks so wild in your head. The wilder it is in your brain, the more you're likely to recall the information.
Okay, so that one's more about memory?
Memory.
Okay.
It's definitely the best book I've ever read on anything I've learned on memory. I wish they gave me that book when I was in high school or something. I would have retained so much more. Yeah. But yeah, it's a great book. There's the 50th Law. That's Robert Greene and 50 Cent. It's like almost like a follow-up to the 48th Law of Power. Which one? That's a controversial book, but it's good for you to know the concepts because other people might use it against you. Yeah, exactly. So at least know what's happening. Yeah, at least know what's happening. But the 50th Law is almost like their continuation of that, and it's just fear. It's the book is about being fearless. When I went through the whole thing with my startup, that book was what made me bounce back. It was the don't be fear. It's similar to the one you mentioned first, courage to be disliked. Yep. It's similar concept. Yeah. Just being fearless, just chasing stuff. Steve Jobs' biography that had some effect on me as well. Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you want to know about money. Everyone should know that. But that's another book someone should make another version of. Yeah, because I think it might be getting a little outdated. Some concept is getting outdated. The Richest Man in Babylon, another great money book that should be refreshed. Yeah. And what else? How Successful People Think. It's this very short book. I think it's like only 120 pages that explains the different types of thinking. Positive thinking, positivity thinking, collaborative thinking. Just different forms that people can think, and there's nothing new that you probably don't know already, but it just reminds you of whenever you're in a situation, you have to like, just like how you said, the thinking fast and slow, it's thinking as well, like what type of thinking do I need here? Like, is this something I need to think of myself, or I need other people's brains, collaborative? Is this something that I need to think in terms of possibilities? Or is this something that I need to like narrow down in? Like I don't know I'm not mentioning the exact names of the thinking. I haven't read this book in like 3 years or 4 years now,
Yeah.
but it expanded my brain to different lens of viewing things.
Gotcha. Damn, okay. Well, with all of that, you have a pretty big reading list. I don't know if any of you have read some of these books before. We would love it if you would comment some other books that we've missed that have had a big influence in your life. We're always looking for new books to read and new ways to think. So please drop them in the comment section of wherever you're listening to this too. Especially on YouTube or something like that. If you're on there, it's like very easy for us to comment and chat with you there.
Yeah.
We also have like a TikTok where we might have some of these things go out.
Oh yeah, Mark is.
We're trying to get that going, man. We'll see how it goes and how it resonates with all of you. But yeah, it could be a way for us to talk about smaller concepts that we've discussed in some of the episodes that we've released so far.
Yeah, this was one of the episodes that stayed true to the tagline of the podcast: foreign, familiar topics, foreign perspectives. So,
excellent. All right. Well, I really enjoyed having this, and I actually have a bunch of new books to read now that you mentioned that I didn't know or haven't heard about before. So, looking forward to those. And with that, we'll call it a pod. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.